Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining into today's session on GRIP's webinar series. We'll be waiting for a few more minutes before we kick off this discussion, but thank you for taking time on a Saturday evening to join us. I'm glad to see we are already getting questions from the attendees. Just before we start, let me also outline the way we have structured this session to make it most effective. Vivek and I'll quickly introduce GRIP to the attendees. I think there are a lot of people here we know who have not been on GRIP's platform before, have never invested before. So we'll take the first 5-10 minutes to just talk about GRIP, the progress we've had, and the some of the questions that we believe are going to be commonly asked. We've also been receiving some questions over the last few days over email and chat, and we'll try to address these questions first. Hopefully that will take care of a lot of the common questions that people have. And towards the last 30 minutes of the call, we'll be very happy to take any questions that come up on the chat box. Request you to keep putting your questions down, and between Vivek and me, we'll try to make sure that all of them get covered. The intention of the session is definitely to provide you more and more perspective about GRIP, about the way the platform works, how do we select deals, what does it mean to be an investor, and we want to cover all the questions and doubts that you may have. Vivek, on that note, why don't we get started?
Sure.
It would be great if we can briefly introduce ourselves. So first, why don't you start and then I can take over.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Vivek Gulati. I am a co-founder and the CEO of Grip Invest. Before starting the idea with Nikhil on Grip Invest, I was working with a company called Wheelseye, where I was working as a entrepreneur in residence and helping them to build a product for the sales product basically. Before Wheels, I was working with a startup called Chalo, where I met Nikhil for the first time. And Chalo, my responsibility was to expand the Chalo business from business development perspective to different cities. Uh, Prior to Chalo, I was working with another startup called Oyo Rooms. I was there for good 4 years and was taking care of the responsibility of expanding Oyo business internationally as well as into the two cities, tier three cities of India. I am a chemical engineer by education. Yeah, so that's a good brief about me. Nikhil, why don't you go
Okay.
ahead?
Thanks, Vivek. So a very slightly different experience from Vivek, while Vivek's been always focused on business development through his career with Oyo, Wheelseye, Chalo, and now with Grip. I started my career in finance as an investment banking analyst with Morgan Stanley. Spent 6 years there. It was a very interesting period of the Indian economy between 2010 to 2016, and got a chance to advise some of the largest unicorns in technology sector today. At the same time, Morgan Stanley played a very pivotal role with SEBI in drafting the REIT regulations, and I was fortunate to be part of that team. In 2016, I started my first entrepreneurial venture as a co-founder of Chalo. Chalo, as some of you may know, is today India's largest private operator of city buses. We deploy our solution on buses like DTC, BMTC, BEST, these city buses that operate for mass transportation and enable a better customer journey as well as higher utilization of these buses. That 4 years gave me a deep understanding of the mobility sector as well as the journey of building a startup. I have leveraged those learnings in my experience with World Bank as a consultant, where I was playing a role in thinking about policy initiatives for Niti Aayog, Ministry of Road Transportation, and a couple of state governments on how to promote public transportation, as well as what can be done to promote electric vehicles. One of the reasons why you see as an investor a lot of deals on mobility on our platform is because both Vivek and I, as a combination of Chalo, Wheelseye, and the World Bank, have tremendous amount of understanding and experience on mobility, as well as electric vehicles. So that's our experience. On the right side of the page, we've also listed down some of our advisors and key investors. Our institutional investors are Anicut Capital and Gemba. We're also fortunate to have support from 4 extremely distinguished individuals. Some of these names may be familiar to you, like Anupam Mittal and Maninder Gulati. But Siddharth and Mr. Gupta have played a key role in setting up the Grip platform from a legal perspective, as well as from a credit process perspective. So these are the people we interact with on a weekly basis and get their guidance on in terms of setting up the business. What does Grip do, right? Let's start with that question. We believe that Indian investors are looking for alternative fixed income investment options. And through Grip, our aim is to provide an answer to that solution with a product that has an attractive risk reward ratio. We're not a platform where you will find multiple investment options. You'll not find mutual funds and bonds and invoice discounting and lease income. For very specific reasons that we'll outline later in the presentation, we work to identify a particular asset class that we believe would be attractive to investors, both from a risk and reward perspective. And we build Grip as an online platform to enable ease of transaction in making that investment. The typical investment period of deals on our platform are 24 to 36 months. And during that period of time, investors can co-invest or invest in small portions along with other investors to purchase and lease physical assets like vehicles, electronics, and furniture. All of these assets are leased to companies. They're not leased to individuals. And I think that's an important distinction, especially as you think of the comparison between P2P platforms and something like Grip. The deals on our platform till now have offered a 20% plus return on an IRR basis, on a pre-tax IRR basis. And the way we structure our returns is to have pre-agreed rentals with the corporate company or the corporate leasee to receive over the 24 to 36 months. We further enhance the security of the transaction through a security deposit or by setting up an escrow account. And to give you the option to invest in very small sizes, the minimum transaction size is kept as 20,000 rupees. Now, every investor has a choice of multiple investment options. And we had the choice as a platform to choose one of those options to start our business with. But there's a very specific reason why we picked leasing, or what is in the traditional language called lease finance. If you look at this slide, the top criteria, the top 5 points: low minimum investment, medium risk profile, physical security, return, and ease of exit, were the 5 most important criteria that investors told us that they're looking from an alternative asset. When we benchmarked the existing assets that are available, we found there were many missing gaps, right? But when we compared it to leasing, we realized that leasing touches all the boxes. On our platform, you can invest at as low as 20,000 rupees. Because you're leasing to a corporate whose diligence can be done, and because you're receiving income on a monthly basis, and hence your risk is reducing, the risk profile is medium. You also have a physical security because the lease is about the asset that you have purchased, and hence there is always something to fall back on in the case of a default. The return profile is attractive. At a 20% plus IRR, you're looking at 3 to 4 times the return of a fixed deposit on an IRR basis, and more than 2 times the return on a yield basis, assuming no reinvestment. And finally, unlike an angel investment where you're dependent on a secondary transaction, an IPO to happen for exit, or in the case of real estate, you're dependent on the market cycles. In the case of a lease transaction, you are getting an exit every month or a partial exit every month because you're getting a monthly return from the transaction. And hence we believe that as an alternative asset class, this made a lot of sense for investors. We do not mean to say that there is no risk in this investment. There is a risk in this investment. Otherwise, the returns would not be what they are. But given a combination of risk and return, we believe that this is something that is potentially attractive to a large number of investors. More importantly, we believe that there is a huge arbitrage that is today happening when customers put their money in a fixed deposit, in a CASA deposit with a bank. That same money is ultimately going to companies at 14 to 18%, right? So what you putting in the bank at 4 to 6% is getting cycled through the banking process to 14 to 18% to companies. We believe there is an opportunity to disintermediate this and have investors directly access companies and get this additional 1,000 basis points, right? The difference between 4% and 14% is 1,000 basis points. Have this additional 1,000 basis points as an earning for them. This can be true for many assets, right? You can say the same is true for bill discounting. But can you do it in an asset class where the risk is managed? And we believe that lease offer that opportunity because they're asset backed. They're not dependent on stock markets or money markets moving based on volatility. You can identify high quality leases in growing industries to bank with or to invest with. You can take security deposits and escrow agreements to further secure yourself, and you get monthly returns. We believed that creating lease finance with this 1,000 basis arbitrage in a risk adjusted manner became attractive for investors. And I think the last question to answer on this piece is why leasing. You need to be in a sector that is obviously growing. We fundamentally believe that leasing as an asset class is going to transform in the next 5 to 10 years. Sometimes you don't even know how much we are leasing or how dependent we are on it. Each of our consumer behavior at our ends is changed fundamentally by companies like Netflix or Uber. Each time you take a car, you're entering into a micro lease transaction. Each time you subscribe to Netflix or watch content on Netflix, you're into a micro lease transaction. Even the fact that you're using Zoom to do this call is a micro lease, right? We are paying a subscription charge to Zoom to facilitate this transaction without having to incur any capex at all. The same thing is true for companies. Companies are increasingly moving to asset-light business models, which means that they do not want to own the asset. They only want to subscribe to the service. I think, I love giving this example. If you think of Amazon Web Services, many of you may be using it in your companies. It's a cloud hosting platform. It's a cloud platform. Amazon requires tremendous amount of warehouse space, servers, cooling stations, racks to host these servers on which they build the cloud. But in reality, that is nothing that Amazon needs to own. They're all commoditized assets. Why can't there be a company that leases those assets to Amazon, right? And Amazon simply procures them. As a company, you are subscribing to Amazon Web Services and not having to build any servers of your own. We are seeing this play out again and again and again across industries, especially in sectors like mobility and electronics. And that is where we are focusing on. And that is why we're focusing on leasing, because the opportunity for us is just getting started and there will be more and more interesting business to do. The last point here is that all the assets that we're talking about are revenue generating assets, right? And that is a very critical distinction. If we were to lease you office, if you were in a financial services company or an IT services company, and we were to lease you office furniture, it's not really core to your business, right? which means two things. One, if it is not making money for you, you're unlikely to pay a high cost for it. You want to minimize the cost for it. And second is, if it is not making money for you, you are unlikely to take a great deal of care for it. All the assets that we are leasing are revenue generating assets for these companies. And hence they're happy to pay more because their returns are higher, and they take an extra degree of care because it makes money for them. And that's our focus, revenue generating assets leased to companies. We also wanted to lay out where we are from a portfolio perspective. All this information is available on our website in a disaggregated manner. You can see the asset page. But just to contextualize where we are, we've been 9 months into our journey and where we are from a numbers perspective. We're fortunate to have 1,200 unique users who have invested for the first time or at least once on the platform. In total, they have invested 22 crore rupees, and that 22 crores has gone to purchase assets and then lease them out. On an overall basis, this has generated 20% plus pre-tax IRR, and we are yet to see any kind of default or delay in the payments. We've also split the portfolio for you in a couple of ways. 50% or 51% of our portfolio is mobility companies, 28% is mobility assets, electronics is 28%, and furniture is 21%. We've also split it by the nature of the business of our leases. 60% is B2B, and 40% is B2B. We continue to focus more and more on the B2B segment because we believe it adds adds lower risk, higher credit profile, and more surety of payments. And that will continue to be our focus. These are some of the logos that we have worked with. The top one is the logos of the companies that we have leased to. The second row is the assets that are leased. And the last one is the equity investors in the companies that we have leased to. We follow a very strict criteria of only leasing to companies who have existing institutional investors. And we're very proud to say that some of the largest and most well-known investors are equity participants in our company. In fact, some of our companies have gone on to raise capital after our lease transactions, significantly reducing the credit risk that is to that portfolio and showcasing the fact that we made the right choice in picking that lease partner. Once again, all of this information is available on our website. This is just to give you a consolidated view. Yeah. I'll stop here. This is a very important slide, and we are fascinated by it. While we expect a lot of people to participate on the platform, I think we're very encouraged by the number of people who have made repeat investments on the platform. About 1,000, when we collected this data, about 1,100 people had already made their first investment. 40% were on their second investment. And 10% of people had already made a fifth investment on the platform. What is equally interesting and encouraging for us is that the number of days taken to make the subsequent investment is reducing. So while it takes 20 days to make the second investment, it takes 19 days to make the third investment, but only 15 days to make the fifth investment for the investor. Our biggest takeaway as we speak to investors is that they like the platform, they like the product, they have seen returns coming back to them on time as per promise, and that has got them to reinvest with us. In fact, our first 250 investors, 60% of them have invested 2 times, and 20% of them are on their fifth investment. Okay. Why don't I stop here about Grip? Just wanted to lay out the journey for you. And let's move on to take some of the questions that we received over emails and chats. Okay. Vivek, maybe the first question that I can pose to you is, as you look at business development, 20% pre-tax IRR seems like a really high number. Why are these companies, if they're good quality companies, why are they leasing from us, and why not just go to a bank or an NBFC and take capital?
Sure. So I think I can divide my answer into 3 points, and these are the 3 points which are very important for any company when they're looking at they're comparing the Grip deal versus a bank or an NBFC deal. And I think this question has come up so many times to us, Nikhil, in our questionnaire as well, in the current Q&A as well. So I think the first important point why company look forward working with Grip or a model like Grip is that our model provides them to keep their model very asset light. Because in our case, these companies are not owning the asset. asset is owned by the LLP, which we create for our investors. So, the business model becomes very asset light. And being an asset light model gives them power of expansion really quickly into the market, right? So if we can think of a company like IPL Truck, right, which is procuring trucks, or a company like Fabelli, which is using fabrication machines, a lot of fabrication machines. And every time they have to buy a fabrication machine, they have to put money from their own invested capital, versus they go to a company like Grip, which is owning the asset and quickly enabling this payment for them. They're happy with it, right? The second point will be the speed of investment. If you look at Grip's platform and what the deals we have done till date, the maximum time we take to fill a deal is between 15 to 20 days. And before that also, our processes are quite quick when compared to a bank or an NBFC. So that's why if you're a founder of a really high growth startup, or you being a founder of a great big company which is NSE listed, you'll always be looking for the speed factor when you are in your expansion phase, or when you are thinking of exploiting the market with your business. So the speed is very important. We are able to provide these companies with speed. The third point is volume and the kind of the tenures in which we provide the money to them, right? So if you look at our Furlenco investments, we have done first Furlenco deal of 50 lakh rupees in the starting of our company. Then we have done a 2 crore deal with them, and we'll again launch a deal with them. So we are really, really flexible towards the company's needs. Whenever they require money, they can directly come to us, and if we have done their due diligence and everything else, then it's a quite speedy process for them, and we are readily available with the access to capital for them. So this again, gives us a 1 point higher than the bank or an NBFC when compared to a bank or an NBFC. So I think these are the three major things why all these companies look forward to work with Grip, and they are working with Grip and raising capital with us, again and again.
And if I can just add to that, Vic, I think giving the example of Everest Fleet, which is a company which is Uber's largest fleet partner in India, when they came to us for leasing assets, they have about 720 vehicles on loan from HDFC Bank, right? But their ambitions are to go to 2,000 vehicles, and they wanted to lease from us. The reason was very simple, right? And the promoter of Everest Fleet also happens to be a shareholder of Grip, and hence a very, very honest conversation with him. We were able to understand that HDFC Bank is happy to provide more capital, but they also want a promoter guarantee in each transaction, right? For some of these companies that are scaling to very large sizes, it is not possible to follow some of the traditional expectations of a bank in terms of getting a promoter guarantee. You have to look at things differently. In this situation, we are leasing to the company, or we're creating a lease option for the company, which is only 200 basis points higher than what an HDFC is leasing. But the company quality, it's a profitable company with a 16% EBITDA, 3.5 crores in monthly revenue, right? So as we create those opportunities, the returns will obviously be lower, the risk will be much lower, but we are competitive in a total offering with other financial products. And finally, while we'll not get into the detail, leasing offers certain tax advantages to companies, because you can claim the lease expense as a expense in your P&L and reduce the corporate tax. Hence, on a post-tax basis, leasing can sometimes be much more effective than taking a loan. Vivek, second question to you, similar light, is how do we find these companies? Like, what's our criteria? What is our way of approaching them?
Sure. So the journey has been very unique for us, because we started a lot, 9-10 months back, and that time, the pandemic was happening, and everybody was looking out for sustaining their business, and while we were only thinking about starting our business. Since that day, what we realized is that we somehow want to protect our investors whenever we are investing in any of the assets. So if you look at majorly three criteria of a company whenever we are selecting a company, and this is the major selection criteria for us. So one being, we invest with the companies where the business model is really, really good. Like they're profit making companies like Everest Fleet or Everest Fleet, which is profit making and, very uniquely pointed their product. The unit economics works out very well. So we try to work with that kind of companies. The second will be the companies where which are backed by certain good VCs. As we have seen in the slide which you have shared, Nikhil, that most of our portfolio companies are backed by tier A, tier B VCs, which is again a confidence giving factor for our investors. That when these VCs which are doing a due diligence and going through a tough process of investing, and they are trusting these companies, they're also trusting their judgment in at least in filtering out our companies. Whatever we do is over and above that. I think the third criteria will be companies which have very unique product. Along with the two above criteria, companies like Clarico, companies like VGot, companies like Birdeye, which have a very unique solution to provide to the public, and they are working in the B2B segment, which gives us another factor of comfort that my asset is leased out to a X company, which is a huge company, which is a profitable company, and even in case of a rainy day, my asset is secured with that bigger company, and the lease will keep coming back to us. So I think these are the three major criteria for us. And third, we can conclude as either a very unique product or a very good B2B leasing company. We do work or we try to figure out a company out of these three criteria.
Yeah, I'm going to add one point to that, or just add one dimension to that, and also link it to the next question, which is about what happens in the case of a default and what are the measures taken. To us, the most critical thing, and several of you have put this on chat or questions, is that yes, we are leasing to early stage companies, but please understand two things. One, that this is it's our own journey, right? When we started off, Vivek and I remember our first transaction was an 8 lakh transaction that we were doing to Clarico. We're just fortunate that we were able to get the right support, the right team to be able to now do 2 crore transactions, a single 2 crore transaction in the beginning of March. So as we make that journey, I see our quality of companies that we're working with improving. The second thing is that the wave of companies that are now introducing new technology, new business models are what we all like to call early stage companies or startups. But I think there's a deeper view required into that company, into that particular deal, to understand what is the real risks. And that is the effort that we try to make on behalf of our investors. There is no deal on the platform that goes where Vivek or I don't invest in our personal capacity, right? We invest in the same terms as every other investor, and we put our money, where our mouth is. One of the checks that Vivek mentioned is, does the company have sufficient cash to pay for at least 70% of the lease period? So if it's a not profitable company, it is funded by equity, and it's dependent on getting more capital. Is the current business model and the current account, current balance bank account enough to cover 70% of the lease payments? Why 70%? Because in 70% of the time, the investor's capital is largely returned through monthly lease payments. 80 to 100% of the investor's capital is returned through lease payments. There is a difference from deal to deal, depending on the leasee to leasee and the type of asset, but this is the general norm that we follow. It means that in a 3-year lease transaction, in 18 to 20 months, you will receive 80 to 100% of your capital back. And hence, if there's a default that happens, from the assets that are recovered, we only need to recover 20 to 30% of value to make sure that your capital is protected. Okay. anything recovered over that will help you generate the profit, right? And our interest is to make sure you get the profit. One of the risk mitigation strategies that we have built, and maybe I can just get to a slide to help me talk about this. If you think about this slide where initially this is the investment you're making, we take a security deposit upfront. We obviously, the first mitigation mechanism is to select the right company, right? Then we take a security deposit upfront. We then have shown blocks for how you receive monthly payments. And then there is, in the case of a default, recovering of assets. One of the strategies we have done is to partner with multiple companies leasing the same asset and hence be able to redeploy in the case of an event or default within our ecosystem. And that increases the chance that we will be able to make this recovery. Okay. I wanted to now take questions that are specific to investment of investors and structure and question that are coming. Maybe I can take this one, but please feel free to add.
Just Nikhil, on the last question only, I think we got a question in the chat bot, and I would like to finish it off because you have already answered that. So Karthik asked us that for the companies like WeGot, where the product is very unique, what will happen in the case of if they default, because we don't have the secondary market available for them today, or we don't have any other companies where we can deploy that kind of asset today. So Karthik, if you look at each of these companies where we are dealing with a very, very unique product, we are mostly dealing with the B2B companies where the leasing happens, or the final leasing happens with a B2B player. A company like ChargeZone, they're putting chargers for bus stations in Ahmedabad, right? Very difficult to find a competition for them, but there is an underlying contract of Ashok Leyland with them. So we try to make sure whenever we are investing in any of these unique products where the secondary market is not available, or we don't have any capacity to resell this product to any other players because there is a unique player of that capacity, we try to cover that risk by a B2B contract and by doing certain escrow things, escrow with the third party and stuff like that.
Okay, perfect. Let me take a broader question that is on how the investment is made and how the structure works. We list various options on the platform. The investor is free to choose and also decide the amount. There is a maximum amount of investment that is also allowed per deal. So while, yes, in certain transactions, which very recently happened, for example, the Big Spoon transaction, where the entire transaction was completed within 24 hours on a platform that prevented some of you from getting a chance to invest, there is a maximum cap. We do not allow anyone to purchase more than 10% of a transaction. We're very happy to relook at that cap and make sure that there is wider participation. The idea, is always is to fractionalize. So thank you for that suggestion, and we'll definitely look into it. But once you have that option and you invest, the money flows from the investor's bank account to a escrow account set up by our payment gateway provider, Cashfree. Only when the deal is 100% complete does the money move from the Cashfree account to the LLP's bank account that is created uniquely for this transaction. We create an LLP because there has to be a legal entity that owns the asset. In our case, it is the LLP instead of being multiple individuals. And obviously, it allows the flexibility of a person owning 1/3 of an electric bike, 1/5 of a charger, right? You can invest as small as you want. This LLP enters into a lease transaction with the leasee and receives the security deposit, the lease payments, all the money from the leasee comes directly to the LLP. No other asset and no other transaction is done in the same LLP. So your money is completely siloed and your returns are completely siloed into this LLP, and this LLP then transacts back to you. Because of the nature of LLP accounting practices and the tax treatment, any disbursements, profit after tax and withdrawal of capital from the LLP is tax exempt in the hands of the investor. So you do not have to pay any further tax at your hand or in the money that you receive. The LLP, when does a taxation, takes the advantage of both depreciation and input GST credit to reduce its own tax liability. So that's how the transaction works. I know some of these things may not be as straightforward, but we are available later on, and your relationship managers are available later on to answer these questions in far greater detail. Yeah. Vivek, I'm going to start off with looking at the questions in the Q&A section. I think we've answered most of the questions that came up before, more theoretically, more at least at a larger level, but we can pick some of this up before.
Why don't I pose few of the questions to you?
Sure.
I have already read a few, and I think there are a couple of questions we can bunch together and answer them. I think I see a question which is coming again and again is why there is a huge difference between the pre-tax number and the post-tax number.
Yeah.
And
okay.
How we can mitigate, and what is the efficient structure? Are we moving towards an efficient structure to minimize that number?
Got it. Maybe I can just also explain what IRR is. It may be something that is very clear to a lot of investors. Unlike most investment structures, our returns come monthly. In fact, in the first year, 40% of the capital is returned to the investor. That's significant, right? And it's almost like an EMI. If you were to compare it to a bullet repayment where all the repayment comes at the end, there is no time, there is no value given to the time. And hence we use IRR as a metric, which gives time value of money to the returns that you receive. Why is this important? Because as an investor, we then give you the freedom to reinvest it, either back in a deal on Grip or anything else, or to spend it, right? And our calculations of IRR factor that advantage of giving you money upfront, the first return within 30 days. The tax structure, I would say, but the difference between pre-tax and post-tax IRR, because of the way IRR is calculated, looks very steep. And for that reason, on our deal page, we have also introduced something called a tax rate calculation, which calculates the percentage tax paid by the LLP and hence effectively by you for each transaction. I would request you to have a look at the that calculation. We can also go into the details, or your relationship manager can go into details of explaining it. But across the transactions, that tax rate varies between 9 to 20% of the total returns received. Okay, which in my view is fairly reasonable for most investment options and for most marginal tax rates. We're always looking for ways to improve the tax returns, but we very much follow the accounting principles, the depreciation rates that are provided by the income tax department and the accounting department in calculating that. If there are better accounting ways, we're always working with our lawyers and tax accountants to factor that in.
Sure. Okay, Nikhil, just one more question, I think very interesting one. And on the same lines is, if Grip does not survive for next 2-3 years, what will happen to the leases which Grip is taking care of?
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting question. And one of the reasons why the LLP model is so effective, the LLP is a separate legal entity from Grip, right? Grip provides services to it. Vivek and I invest in it. But if Grip, for whatever reason, we hope not, and we don't aim to have Grip shut down, but for whatever reason, if Grip was no longer in existence, the LLP continues to be in existence. And the relationship of the lease lies between the LLP and the leasee and the company. Nothing that if Grip shuts down, that relationship will not get affected. And the obligations of making the rental payments on a month-on-month basis do not change. As people who have already invested in the deals know, Vivek and I are also the designated partners or equivalent to directors of the LLP. And hence we are personally responsible for making sure that these obligations continue and the LLP continues to function. Hence, the impact of Grip is not felt by the investors, even in the worst case situation.
Sure. Yeah, that's I think gives the answer. One more very interesting question, Nikhil, which we are getting is around two things. One is why we do, the asset we do. There are few deals which are for 2 years, and there are few deals which are for 3 years. And somebody mentioned that within the same asset also we do 2 years and 3-year lease as well. So what is the dynamics there and how that happens?
Sure. I think this comes down to the type of asset, the type of company. It is not a simple criteria. We understand that as an investor, and I think Vivek and I are in the same boat, um, that investors would always prefer a shorter term lease because it's better from a risk perspective. However, the decision for whether it's 2 years or 3 years for us is largely dependent on the type of company we're leasing to and the type of asset we're leasing to. Just to give an example, battery packs, electric battery packs have a fairly short life, a 3-year life, right? We want to be making sure that our lease transactions are not more than 2 years because we do not want to be in a situation where the battery life was finished before the lease term, and that would not be helpful, right? And hence we make sure that those are 2-year transactions. But we're doing a transaction with Holysol, which is a warehouse company, and we did this transaction 2 months back, where we're leasing racks made out of iron for warehousing, right? These racks, even after 3 years, are sold in the secondary market for a 70% residual value. So if you buy it for 100, it still sells for 70% because they're pure iron racks, extremely extremely rigid and durable quality racks. Now, in those transactions, if we do a 3-year deal, it is actually beneficial to the investor because the tax liability is lower and the returns can be higher. At the same time, companies like Holysol have almost 120 crore rupees in monthly revenue, cash positive, cash balance, and hence we are comfortable with taking a 3-year risk on it. So we look at these factors to decide whether it's a 2-year lease or 3-year lease. Yeah. Vivek, maybe you can sorry for changing slide. Maybe there are a couple of questions on tax, and maybe you just want to complete those, given they were previous to that. Does an investor need to still file tax after receiving post-tax return from investors?
Okay. So no, they do not need to file their taxes once they once the taxes are filed with the LLP. Because this works as you being a partner in that LLP, and the LLP is paying all the taxes on your behalf. So if you're receiving a post-tax return from GRIP, which means you don't have to pay anything further in terms of tax on that income.
Okay. Yeah. Vic, secondly, would we ever do appreciating assets? We've only been looking at depreciating assets. Would we ever do that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So I think when I think me and Nikhil are on same on this thing, that when we started the product, we thought about appreciating products like property, commercial property, commercial leasing, and everything else what we can do. But the actual problem which we want to solve and which we have realized over the time was that these companies which are going to expand into the market and which are looking for expansion, they actually need assets which are depreciating assets, and they don't want to put their expensive VC capital into purchasing that asset today, right? Because that money can be better utilizing in hiring a very good team or researching out the product. So our agenda from day one was to help these companies, either a startup or a NSE listed company, and by helping them with getting these assets or procuring these assets for them and then deploying it. The other point of view of looking at is that an appreciating asset will not give you tax benefits as we get the tax benefits in case of a depreciating asset, because there is a certain depreciation percentage which you can claim towards the usage of these assets. So I don't think in the near future we are looking at any appreciating asset to go into the market of any appreciating asset.
Yeah, I think both of them are interesting options, and there are many other platforms that are looking at appreciating assets. Yeah. I think there are certain inherent advantages of depreciating assets that we're looking at. The most important one is the predictability of cash flows, right? In an appreciating asset, for example, let's say real estate, there is a lot of risk about what may be the value at the end of the life of your investment, right? And when you want to exit 2 to 3 years later, or 4 or 5 years later, will the market be supportive of that value? I think that's a question that most of us don't have an answer to. The beauty with depreciating assets, and this is another question that's come on the chat, is we know the value not only of the lease payment, but we also agree on the value of the sale of the asset at the end of the life. And that means that an investor has complete predictability of their returns, not only on a monthly basis, but also the end of life value. The end of life value is obviously lower than the today value. It's a depreciating asset. In fact, it's lower than even the book value of the asset that is held on account of depreciation. But the combined returns make it still very attractive to play in that space with complete predictability on how the returns are. Yeah. We still have about 80 pending questions on the chat box, and it's a Saturday evening. I don't want to keep all of them. We'll try to take a few more questions, but our guarantee that we will come back to everyone to individually respond to any of the questions, or we'll publish a more general FAQ after this call, answering all the questions to all people who have attended. So that's a commitment from our side, but we'll do our best to take as many questions as possible, and maybe organize another such session to be more longer. I'm just trying to pick up a couple of questions that are repeated again and again. And okay, there's if an investment gets oversubscribed, what happens, right? Sometimes you may have noticed that the bar on the deal says 100%, 101%, 103%. What happens is that when the deal gets about 80 to 90% filled, and our relationship managers have a sense that there are a lot of investors looking at this opportunity, we get a sense from how the website is behaving, we reach out to the company, the leasee, and ask them if they're interested in taking more assets. If they say yes, and it meets our credit checks, we then extend the deal for taking additional capital to purchase more assets and lease. We only open the oversubscription option if your capital can actually be deployed. If your capital cannot be deployed because the deal has reached its maximum, then we will not offer the oversubscription. So the oversubscription is just, you can feel comfortable to continue investing. Your capital will get deployed. It is not like an IPO where your capital gets returned or it will be done on a pro rata basis. Okay. Ritesh, good to have you on this call. I know this has been a discussion with us many times on a credit evaluation agency. The work is still on at our end. I'll be honest to tell you, it has been a far more difficult process to onboard credit rating agencies and have them think about our lease transaction and the kind of companies we work with. They're typically more used to working with much larger, mid-cap, large-cap companies and do the rating for them, or be specialized in something like a real estate or an NBFC sector. We are continuing to work with a few partners to find this. And as of now, in April or May, we will do our first transaction, which will have a credit rating. Okay, it will be specific to that transaction, and then we will roll it out to other transactions. But as a pilot, that is what we have currently planned. Karan, your question is, can the LLP lease it to other people? Can we sweat the asset more? The answer is it potentially can. But once again, that will take away from the predictability of returns. Today, it's very important for us to tell you exactly what returns you will receive and for you to know what you're getting into. Our aim, hence, is to enter into a lease transaction with one company for the entire tenure, and hence provide that predictability with 100% utilization being with that company. Okay. I see a lot of comments and questions about showing the post-tax IRR. It's something we will definitely keep in mind, and we'll definitely try to add it. At this point of time, to give visibility, what we do is when you put in the amount of money you want to invest, we show you both the pre-tax returns and the post-tax returns, as well as the month-on-month cash flow that you will receive on a post-tax basis. We have done that, but I hear the suggestion for including metrics like yield, CAGR, and post-tax IRR. We definitely want to be as transparent as possible. You should know exactly how much money you're getting in hand. We've been providing you that number in terms of absolute number, but we'll definitely think about how to also display the post-tax number. Yeah. Okay.
Nikhil, I think we should put 2-3 more questions. And
sure.
Yeah, I think I got one which is little different and really exciting. Is somebody asked that Grip's success till now was because we have a lot of retail investor investing into it, that into our platform. So do we see any bottleneck in front of us to take that into Grip's taking Grip's growth into the account? Is it a bottleneck for us, or is it a good factor for us?
While many of you may not be able to see the stats on this webinar, but there are 150 investors who have joined us. It's we're great to be hosting a webinar to such a large audience, and very humbled by it. We have been excited that we have been seeing nearly a 40% month-on-month growth in unique users on our platform, combined with a 43% repeat rate. I can tell you from, these are numbers, but I can also tell you from qualitative information that we receive tremendous amount of information and inbounds about people who are looking to invest. I think we're excited by what we're seeing. I think there's really a need for people to look for alternative options for investing. People are looking for diversification, especially when the risk return arbitrage is exciting. This is how partly the problem that we started with about investing our own money. So I don't see a challenge for growth. Do we see other forms of capital, like maybe large family offices, maybe some institutions participating? Sure. But Grip as a platform, and Vivek and my philosophy, as well as the philosophy of the team, is to build this for individual investors who do not have that many options to invest in, right? And that will never change.
Okay.
Vivek, I wanted to take up a question on regulation. I think this one's come up again a couple of times. Sure. Unfortunately, and I say this, vehemently, unfortunately, we're very unfortunate that we are not a regulated entity under SEBI or RBI. We very much would like to be. However, there are two challenges. Under SEBI deals in the purchase of equity shares and debt shares. That's the regulation it covers. There is today no regulation when it comes to purchase of physical assets. Back in 2014, and this is a publicly available document, SEBI had taken out a document on crowdfunding for alternative asset classes. It was a fantastic document with great pieces of regulation and great suggestions. Unfortunately, that regulation was never passed. What we have tried to do is to replicate the suggestion that SEBI had made when we designed our product. But because it's not a regulation, we can't get registered under it. Second thing is that RBI today governs companies that function as an NBFC business. Our business does not fall under NBFC business, and we cannot get an NBFC license or an RBI license either. The only regulation that we today have the ability to follow is that set by the Ministry of Company Affairs when it comes to the governance of LLPs and how they need to be regulated and monitored, the kind of business they can be in, and that is something we follow. Our lawyers, JSA, and I spoke about Siddharth, are looking at different structures that Grip can adopt to become regulated under SEBI. We believe that we have found one such structure. There is still maybe another 30 days, 40 days, 45 days of work to do with lawyers, investment bankers, trusteeships to implement that structure. But we definitely want to be an entity registered under one of the governing bodies in India. And that is the path that we will go down. Yeah. Okay. Vic, any other question that you picked up that could be interesting to answer, relevant to answer?
I think one question which is asked by somebody, and they asked about our last deal with Big Spoon, and there we have put in this section as right to revenue, and they've asked that why are we not doing it for different for the other companies, as we are investing in a couple of startups in our portfolio. So sure. Why are we not doing this type of structure with other companies? Do you want me?
Yeah, maybe I can start and you can add. So to us, I think that if you've been an investor with us from the first deal, you will see that we have constantly tried to add these options and more security features. You will see a few more actions come from our end in the next few weeks. There is something called an ECS or an eNASH, where basically it's something like a post-dated check, but it's a digital post-dated check. And we are now implementing this retrospectively across all of our companies. Any company defaulting on that is a criminal action and hence adds further protection to investors. So we are taking this measure. What we are doing, what we did with BigSpoon, is something we're definitely looking to do with others. There is another deal in the works which will have a similar structure, and we will definitely try to replicate best practices. So somewhere this is part of our own learning curve, but somewhere there are special situations for companies like BigSpoon, which are very early or going through a particular journey with respect to their raising of capital, where it is absolutely mandatory that we do this. And that is why we introduced it in that transaction. Vivek, you should add, given that you negotiated that.
Yeah, I think this was a feature where, and we have negotiated based on the situation or the journey where BigSpoon was at that time. And we're definitely, a team is making effort to do more such of protective investment methods for all of our deals which we are doing. As you mentioned, Nikhil, we are going to do eNASH for our companies, retrospectively as well. And we're trying to build more and more safety and security features for our investors or for our assets, so that we don't end up losing money in any of our deals. So we are trying to protect our deals as much as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Perfect. Maybe we have time for one or two more questions,
Sure.
Vivek. There are a couple of questions on Grip's business model, and we want to be also very transparent about that. We do disclose this information on the website. Grip takes up to 2% processing fee from the investor on each transaction. However, we want to align with the interest of the investor. We do not take this 2% upfront. In fact, it is taken on a monthly basis as the lease income is earned. So for example, if Holly Sol or Everest pays 100 rupees as a lease amount every month, Grip takes 2% of it as its fees, and the remaining is distributed to the investor. In the LLP structure, this is an advantage that 2% is an expense for the LLP and hence reduces the tax obligation. So the effective fees for the investor is even less than 2%. We also take a processing fee from the leasee of 1%. This is because of the paperwork, the stamp duty, the documentation that needs to be done when we onboard the leasee, and covers our business development costs. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I'll pick one from Sharmila and Karan Chadda. They asked us, why don't we do a higher ticket size of deal, or why don't we do debt financing for these companies?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So we are, as Nikhil also told us, that we are doing this LLP structure, and we are limiting a few number of investors in each of LLPs. That is one of the reasons why we do any deal anywhere between 50 lakh rupees to a 1.5 crore kind of a ticket size. But now, as you must have seen, that we have done a deal of 2 crores with ChargeZone. So we'll try and keep experimenting around the investment size of each of these deals, and we'll gradually increase it once we get more confidence about the companies. And we're definitely looking forward to increasing our size of our deals. As far as the debt financing is concerned, or why we are not doing the debt financing, our fundamental belief is that we want to become the leasing organization. We want to deal with certain safety measures, and we want to protect our investments with some physical assets. And that is one of the reasons we do not want to do debt or any other instrument at this point in time.
Maybe I can pick the last question, Vivek, which is about exit during the investment period. And this is obviously something that we have got many times from people. We would very much like to facilitate people to have an early exit, right? 2 or 3 years, you may want to exit before that. And we will either be building a option on the platform for exit, or we will be creating a way for Grip as a platform or some of our institutional partners to purchase the deal and allow you the chance to exit. We're very hopeful of being able to do one such transaction or offer this for the first transaction in the next quarter. But this is a product feature that we're very keen to offer to investors, either as a secondary trading exchange between investors or where the platform can support it. And that's something that you should definitely expect from our side. Okay. I'm going to pause here because we could almost go on for the next couple of hours answering the questions. As our commitment, we have about 71 unanswered questions. We'll definitely come back to the investors. I would request some of them who are saved, whose names are not displayed, to maybe drop us a separate communication with their email numbers, email IDs or phone numbers for us to reach out to them. We thank all of you again for this time, for your interest in Grip. It is very encouraging for Vivek and I and the team who are on this call to see this level of engagement. And we continue to make sure that we deliver on our promise to not only bring new and more interesting, more attractive, reduced risk deals on the platform, but to make sure that you have a great experience throughout the journey with respect to your returns, and then ultimately believe in us to be able to reinvest. So thank you so much. Vivek and I will sign off. Good evening and have a great weekend.
Good evening, guys. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.